Start with Linda, please. I think I have a chair as well. So Linda is CEO of Helpshift. Helpshift provides a messaging-based customer service solution that includes AI, knowledge, case management, interactions, so basically the entire gamut. They're particularly attractive. They were very attractive to one industry, gaming, that gave them 600 million users, so it's a pretty impressive number. Before Helpshift, she was CEO at Optimizely and spent 10 years at Salesforce. To her right, we have Marina Kalika, who heads product and solution marketing for Nuance enterprise business. I assume I don't need to introduce Nuance to this audience. She joined from Attach Commerce, who is one of the company Nuance acquired to bring messaging and chat capabilities. Then we have Tobias Goebel, who is a veteran the self-service industry, I guess. He's been at VoiceObject, Voxeo, Aspect, is now running product marketing at Sparkcentral. Sparkcentral, for those of you that don't know, is a company that started with social service with an innovative agent-centric approach, and over the years kind of broadened the footprint to cover all digital channels. And last but not least, we have Richard Kimber, founder and CEO of Daisee. He comes from Sydney, Australia. Daisee is a company that creates industry-specific AI applications. Before, he was CEO of the OFX Group, and is also known for having set up for Google the entire operation in Southeast Asia. So after this formal introduction, maybe you guys want to share a fun fact about yourself.
I'll get it started. I love beer, so I have 2 dogs named Barley and Hops got his name because he's 3-legged.
That's awesome. That's an awesome fun fact. And fun fact about me, you'll hear my accent as we continue the conversation. So you guys all have to guess where I'm from, and Nuance people cannot answer because they know. So the fun fact to be disclosed later.
I am, actually, I was born and raised in Germany, and people tell me I mostly got rid of my accent, but there's one word that I just can't pronounce right, and that's the interrogative adverb where. Where? Is it where? Where? I live in Boston now, so I guess that doesn't matter anymore.
Hi everyone. My fun fact is recently I met the most recently deposed Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull at a university event, which puts us in a very esteemed company of the Italians. We've had 4 prime ministers in very quick order, all of whom have been deposed by their own political party. So I know that politics is, yeah. So I know that politics is a big topic here in the States, and I'm sure all the Republicans in the room would like to repeat what happened down in Australia. Just to get everyone fired up. I should do are there any Republicans in the room? It may well be.
So let's start with a topic. It's almost a bit provocative. Charting your path to scaling conversational AI almost implies that it's hard. So let's try to frame the topic, the issues, and maybe you guys can share from your customer perspective what has been the challenges, lesson learned with trying to scale conversational AI.
I'll take it. So I think as a vendor who works in this space, it's incumbent upon us to try to simplify AI and the use of bots for our customers. So we're really working hard on reducing the data necessary for the training sets themselves to be able to create the intent models that you heard the previous speaker talk about. So we used to ask for 10,000 issues, and now we're down to 500. So we made really fast progress on that front. And then also trying to be really prescriptive to our customers about how to use this. Today, we have one customer who will reduce their agent volume, which was a question earlier, by 10% with just one issue, an issue that represents a large volume for them. And they're doing right now, the bots are firing, over 1.5 million bots are firing every week. So we are doing this like really big scale, and we can do it really fast. So we have another customer in retail who will use bots to deflect a lot of issues coming in and try to use this so that they don't have to hire as many seasonal workers. And we will get this up and running in a matter of a couple of weeks. So we're trying to really simplify for customers.
Yeah, it's a great point, Linda. I'll add to it.
Yeah.
I think it depends. It depends on what your business goal is. I mean, AI there's a lot of hype. We just heard from previous speakers, there's a lot of hype about AI. And it's all about innovation and the speed of innovation. And so it's important to understand what your goal is. What is your business goal? What are you trying to solve for, right? So AI is here, but it's innovating as we go. And it's in the process of being very innovative, very quick. But to get there, you really have to understand what it is you're trying to solve for. Find your most frequently asked type of questions and type of issues that your customers are coming to you, and start with that. Or figure out where your biggest pain point is to automate that and create your bots, your conversational AI, your virtual assistants, whatever you call them, for that particular issue, and then scale. Don't try to solve the world hunger. Don't try to go everywhere and say, okay, my bots are going to solve everything, and I'm going to fire all my contact centers employees. That's not the point. We believe that the point is that you want the humans and artificial intelligence to work together, hand in hand, so that your bots are taking most frequently asked issues and questions that are easier to answer, and your humans, your human workers, are taking more complex questions, whether it's contact center, people on the phone, or it's your web chat agents, whoever they are. The important thing is that you have to work together. So that's our guidance on that.
So I tend to look at the system being built around 3 pillars. You've got AI, you've got humans, of course, and you've got knowledge. Yep. So thinking as those 3 is kind of your pillars, how should what word of advice can you provide in terms of tying them all together? Where to draw the line between human and automation? How to reconciliate and harness knowledge to train the AI? Who wants to take this one?
Sure, maybe I can start with that one. First of all, I think it's important to realize what AI really is and what the purpose of it is, right? It's, at the end of the day, and the same thing with agents, in the corporate world, you have information on one side and you have customers on the other side. And the customers are trying to get to that information, okay? The information could be raw data, it could be assembled information, could be explanations about business processes, how does this work, things like that. The agent is nothing but an interface to that data, to that information. And the AI is another form of a user interface to the information. So in that regard, you could consider a chatbot another form or a new form of a hire in your organization. That's becoming part of your workforce. You could consider it a digital employee that lives along with your live employees. Because at the end of the day, they do the same job. They answer questions from the customer, they consult customers, they maybe notify customers proactively. So then it becomes a matter of defining, okay, what are the things, the questions that come inbound to us? What are the things that we give out outbound? And there's probably 10 to 12 different types of inquiries and types of things that agents do in the contact center today. What you can then do is you can stack them up in a hierarchy of growing kind of complexity or growing empathy needed to do these tasks. And at the top you have things like de-escalate a customer situation, right? At the bottom you have look up data and read it back. So it's insane to think that today we use agents for both the bottom and the very top, right? The bottom more and more people realize I can get quicker answers, if just give me a direct way to directly access that information, whether it's a website, a mobile app, a chatbot, doesn't matter, right? Customers want that now. But somewhere in the middle is where you would draw your line. I call that your digital comfort level. How comfortable are you giving everything below to an AI and everything above keep with your agent? And over time, you will see that you can raise that line, right? As you become more comfortable with the technology and your customers and constituents become more comfortable using the technology.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to build on that. I agree with a lot of what you've said. I think one of the other elements that's difficult to capture and I think makes this whole area very complex is the context. And I think one of the challenges here is when you're looking at automation is that the same humans asking the same question can have a completely different context for the question. And I think that's where it becomes very difficult when you say that you're going to try to automate the answer. And any one of the four of us could ask the same question, but actually have an entirely different context around why we're asking the question. And I think when you look at machine learning and supervised learning, that's where, when you look at AI problems, that they become difficult because, in a very short conversation, which is what typically you've got in chat, it's very difficult to determine context. So what we advocate is using machine learning much more so in longer string conversation where there's a lot more contextual information, and we find that our accuracy rates are much higher in that context.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And actually, I was going to say, I think it's when you have those longer conversations, and sometimes they're synchronous because customers come and they go, and they want to go about their own business, and then they come back. The important thing is to keep that context of the conversation, and that context needs to be passed from the bot, from the virtual assistant, to the live chat agent or to the person on the phone, because that's the most important thing for as consumers. We hate to repeat ourselves, right? So when you start the conversation with a business, and then you pass to another channel, and you have to start over again, that's the worst. So that, to me, customer experience is most important in this case, and you have to keep that context flowing.
Can I add 20 more seconds to that? So the big challenge is, right, where does that, how do you prepare the information, right, so that it can be utilized by a chatbot? Companies might have invested into FAQs a while ago, right? Who maintains those? A company might have invested into a knowledge base. Who maintains that? And is that maybe optimized for a web where you have a big screen? So there's a practice called knowledge engineering that goes about and creates information architectures. And a famous man once said, there's no AI without IA. There's no artificial intelligence without having a solid information architecture in place first, because garbage in, garbage out. Right? If you have crap quality in your data, then the chatbot can't do much but produce that crap quality when talking to the customer. That was more than 20 seconds, but.
Thanks. So let's look at the angle of the technology platforms that you can use. There's a pretty fragmented market. There's a lot of options. You can have platform, you can have solutions. Some are specialized, some more horizontal. So some word of advice on how to approach the choices and make sense of all the options available.
I'll just chime in here and just say, I think you sort of to your point earlier, you gotta think about what it is you're trying to achieve, and then design it, I believe, kind of from the consumer experience first. For us, we deal with B2C companies, so we're thinking about consumers and the way they want to interact with brands. And then what's your outcome? Is it to reduce agents? Is it to maybe increase the interaction that you have with this newfound productivity that you gain? But I think you have to stitch together the technology so that you can provide the most elegant response back to your consumer, because really that's where I think this game is going to be played out, as I think John pointed out, which things are going to move really quickly, and then the person or the company, the brand that projects the best consumer experience is probably likely the winner, because when we used to focus a lot on agent experience, I mean, the agent numbers will probably come down and you'll be left with very high-skilled knowledge workers, and even the agent experience will have to evolve to accommodate that.
Yeah. I wanted to tie it back to what John was talking about, which is innovation, customer experience, and security, right? So I think designing those, to your point, designing those conversations in a way that they are innovative, that customer experience doesn't suffer by putting the bot in front of you instead of real person, and also secure, right? So the ability to authenticate within those conversations, bringing it all together, and not having separate siloed experiences. I think that's what's important. So when you're looking at different vendors out there and see who can do what, of course it depends on what you're trying to achieve, but if you're trying to achieve this seamless experience, you need to find a platform that allows you to do that and connect the dots. Yeah, and a lot of you might have heard of this dichotomy of machine learning versus rules-based approaches. And you could equate that to the different user interfaces that these approaches generate, which is one could be called truly conversational, where you can type in anything. It's basically a blinking cursor you're designing for. And the other one is what I call a button bot, where you really have just limited choices to advance the dialogue. None is better than the other. If you open the Amazon app now, not now, but today. Don't do it now. Sometimes I do that and I invite people to try it, but not needed in this case. Do it later. Open the Amazon app and look for customer service. They have now found a great way to combine a button bot with live help, but they start right away in a conversational canvas. So the button bot basically asks, are you asking about your recent order? Because of course they know the most recent order, right? And it's most likely you are, so you just tap on yes. And then once the bot has collected the information, you get transferred to a live agent. That's a great experience, great use for a button bot. Very simple, rules-based flow, almost IVR-like, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's a good experience. I'll give you another example. Early this year, late last year, I was part of a great team of, small team of people that created an award-winning chatbot for a supermarket chain in Europe called Lidl. And that's Margot, the wine bot. And that one would not have worked with rules or buttons, because what that does, it gives you advice what kind of wine to pair your food with. And it knows over 250 dishes. So you can't have a menu of 250 items. So there you can literally type in freely, what goes well with chicken Kiev, or, I'm making a party tonight, what kind of wine, should I get, and you can have a conversation. So it depends on the use case, what kind of approach makes sense, and there's different grades of maturity of, NLU, natural language understanding based or rules-based platforms versus those that try to absorb massive amounts of tagged data. And at the end of the day, look at the use case and make your choices accordingly. Can I add 20 seconds, 10 seconds? So it's important. You get a minute. Thank you. It's important to design for the problem you're trying to solve, but it's also important to do it across different channels, right? Because you're trying to support the customer journey for your customers, if you're a business working with customers. And the customer journey, our consumers are on multiple channels at once, a lot of times. So you want to make sure that you support those consumers on the channels of their choice, at the time of their choice, with experience of their choice. So it spans typing, it's conversational voice, and SMS, messaging, Apple Business Chat. Now there's Google, RBM, that ability. So there's all different channels, and you have to span those, and Facebook, and the Alexas of the world. So all of those need to be supported. So you have to figure out where your consumers are and how you're going to support them across those channels seamlessly.
So let's continue on this topic of the design and scoping that is pretty critical. Can you guys elaborate a bit on what are the critical elements that needs to be secured? Maybe Richard, you want to chime in now?
Yeah, sure. So from a design point of view, the most successful applications we've seen have been where the initial deployment has been to the customer-facing staff before it goes to the clients. So in that regard, particularly this is talking more about supervised learning here, where you're actually deploying using your most skilled agents to train with machine learning. So if I was to offer some advice, I would be looking at that style of deployment. For me, I think it's tread carefully, move slowly. Because I think this is an area where the technology is potentially ahead of the use cases. And I think we've seen a lot of deployments in Australia where companies have gone out there with this big promises about the bot, and then have had to actually withdraw the service because the customer experience has been so poor. And if you want to look up some case studies on Twitter, just type in Telstra sucks, which is a hashtag for Australia's largest phone company, who launched a bot a little bit too early, and so actually had a very negative reaction. So I think I'd probably cause a little controversy here by saying I think I'm not sure all bots are ready for prime time, and I think some of them should be tested a lot behind the scenes before you kind of release them to your clients. And I guess the final kind of insight that we've seen is I liken a good bot to be more like an app in the sense that it's kind of narrow. So you want an app for catching a bus or an app to order some food, that's great. And I think you can kind of contain the intents and things like that to within an app space. So I would almost think about bots as kind of having multiple bots across your organization designed for very specific use cases. I would not try to build the all singing, all dancing Uber bot.
Yeah, and I also want to add that good bots are a result of great design, much more so than great technology. So to build a good bot, don't hire software engineers, and I mean that in the nicest way. What I mean by that is it's not a mathematical challenge. It's a human-machine interface design challenge, and there's experts out there that you should hire that you find among psychologists, linguists, there's writers, authors, poets, philosophers. Those people have studied how humans behave and how humans communicate, and these are the people you want to hire, and that's what the big firms are doing. I learned 2 years ago from Capital One, the first bank here in the US that launched an Alexa skill. They hired a former storyboard writer from Pixar to help them with their voice user interface design. If you adopt that mindset of design first, technology secondary, I think you'll be good. You'll be much more successful.
Cool. How about we open it up for questions from the audience?
I see
We need
one here.
While you bring in the microphone, for those of you that want to get to know the human intelligence behind the artificial intelligence of Margot the wine bot, my former colleague Lisa Michaud is in the room. She's presenting tomorrow, and she's also at the Aspect booth. Ask her everything you want to know about wine and NLU. Sorry.
You're fine. This question, is it Richard that's on the end?
Yep.
Okay. You mentioned having treat your bot like for apps and have multiple. So it's common in most companies to have different companies that have different AIs or bots that are representing whatever from their organization?
Yeah, there's a famous airline in Australia, Qantas. They have deployed multiple different instances of different bots, and they've done that as a very conscious strategy in order to take care of the different issues that arise through air travel. And they tried to use a broader strategy initially, and then found that particularly with the button type bot, it got confused within a few clicks. And the problem with those kind of button bots is that when you get to more than 200 branches on your tree, you're done. And so the technology kind of will give you a little spinning wheel effect. And so ultimately there is actually quite a big challenge in terms of the multi-threaded nature of the question. So they've been much more successful with a narrower bot, one that deals with frequent flyer questions, one with deep laning, and so on. So that's kind of an example of a company that's had a much more successful approach with the app, more narrow focus.
Okay. So are these dealt with like different companies, or is just one company making different kind of bots for them? Or, I mean, is it a hodgepodge of?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, they've definitely got a consistent framework underneath in terms of a messaging layer, but they have tried a couple of startups as well as some of the bigger players. And I think one of the challenges, is really finding the right fit for each organization. And obviously, every enterprise is full of its own spaghetti. So, unfortunately, there's no one easy answer.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers.
May I extend that question to how are you handling sort of intent shifting when you're working down a single bot to move across the bots that you have in place?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a great question. You know, it basically comes back to like that escalation framework where, you know, you've got to figure out how the bots relate to each other, and it's really looking at the branching and the in the information architecture. As you design it, you know, you have to really think through, you know, how many of those would you have? You know, you don't want to have 100, but you may have 10. And I think in terms of designing it from an IA perspective, it becomes more logical to break the problem down. It's quite difficult when you know, try to map any organization, even in the healthcare space, as we saw earlier. You know, the complexity gets very large very quickly. So I think, you know, from my perspective, it's having seen the branching and escalation that seems to work pretty well.
Yeah, I think you want to marry the two, right? When you want to start with something like what is your problem? You can use sort of an intent-based AI approach to that, and then you can narrow down once you have like a pillar or an app was talked about, to then, you know, you could use something that detects choice, and then you can go from there. That maybe it hands off to a live person, back to a bot. You should be able to kind of pick and choose across different AI approaches and different decision tree type approaches.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to, you have to figure out what your overall architecture looks like to solve a particular problem, whether it's progressive disclosure of bots to eventually escalate to a human, or is it independent bots kind of solving different problems that eventually gets you to the right agent group, you know, to the right agent to answer the question that couldn't be. So there's all different ways to solve it, but it depends what you're trying to solve for.
And from my experience, it's less about intent shifting. I think people are actually not jumping around. You know, vendors like to give these examples of, how's the weather in Paris? And then, oh no, I meant I want to book a ticket for New York. I mean, that's not how people come to you with one issue, right? So they're not shifting as much as they're going deeper on the same intent, I think. So what you need to design for in what I call conversational architecture, which is a derivative of the IA from the web world, the sitemap perspective, is to predict, okay, if we're entering a topic, right? Let's say an app that I worked on, a bot which was for a car maker. You know, somebody might ask, you know, what is concierge service? So there was a luxury car maker that had a concierge service. So you give the answer, and then you have to expect that they're going to keep asking, how much is it, right? But most bots fail at that point because they're like 1Q, 1A, right? Because they aren't designed for depth. But if you create the conversational architecture and pre-think what are the routes that are likely going to be taken, then you achieve pretty good likelihood of being able to answer the question.
So it's partially frustrating because we're just getting warm up, and now we're coming to the conclusion of this segment, but those speakers are not running away. They will be around at the break and during the conference, so you can continue the conversation, if I may use that word. So before we end this panel, I'd like each of you maybe to give a tip or a word of advice to the people in this room that want to get their conversational project to the next level.
I'll be a dissenting voice here. I don't think you should go slow. I think you should go fast. I think, you know, if you go slow, your competitor is going to pass you by. I think you can be pragmatic and try one kind of pillar, and you can use like if you have a web app, you can use an A/B testing kind of tool to allocate a percentage of your traffic to test the experience.
Mine would be designed for conversation, designed from the consumer perspective, not from the vendor perspective. And if you move fast, make it narrow. If you move slow, you can be a little bit more broader in your intent.
I had the pleasure earlier this year to contribute to a book that I can recommend to you, which is called Ubiquitous Voice by Linda Foxon, who's here as well, I think, in the event.
I was there.
Yeah, so several of us contributed. I wrote an essay in it arguing for, you know, hiring liberal arts majors. So my tip to you is hire liberal arts majors to help you with this stuff. If you choose to go with a vendor, ask them to identify where their liberal arts majors sit. If they don't have any, you might want to stay away.
Yeah, I guess my tip is to look at the data. So I think it's less. So there's the element of the human design, there's the element of the technology, but I think ultimately it's really a focus on what's being said. So I think for me it's about the content. So I think we ultimately can get excited about the technology, but fundamentally I think it's more about the content. I think we should not use this technology to just purely to take cost out. I think it's much more about getting closer to your customers. And what John Chambers said before about products being commoditized, and ultimately customer experience is how you differentiate. That's why I think you'd be very careful with the use of your bots, because this is the most critical interaction with your clients. And so I would be very careful about how you use it.
So we'll learn an extra trick today from Marina. She didn't disclose where she's coming from, so you have to come and visit her at a booth. And with this, how about a warm round of applause to our panelists?